You know what? Can y'all hear me without the mics? Is that all right?
No. Really can't hear outside.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll try my best. At least it's a little awkward. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Connor. If you haven't met me before, I'm a community organizer with Orlando Against Police Crimes. This is going to be an interactive training today on political repression and how to fight back against it. So there will be a space for folks to ask questions. We have some outstanding civil rights lawyers here with us tonight who are going to answer some of your questions. We also have an interactive training at the end where you can kind of practice your skills that we go over. So definitely stick around for the more interesting parts. For my part, I was tasked with coming and introducing and talking about what is FBI repression and how do we fight against it. And just to introduce us as a local community group, in case you haven't heard of us, we're a grassroots organization, and the main thing that we do in the community is we organize with families who are the victims of police murder, and we fight for accountability and justice. And you know, justice looks different for every family, but over the past year, we've had the honor to stand side by side with 3 families in our community. The family of Luis Lopez, who was killed in February of last year. That's Luis Lopez, say his name.
Luis Lopez!
We also are fighting for a man known as Tyrone Bartley, who was killed in his own home last year. Say his name.
Tyrone Bartley!
And most recently, we've been working to get justice for Caleb Williams, who was killed in the last couple of months. Say his name.
Caleb Williams!
And you know, that's the main aspect of our work, but the other aspect of our work is that we fight against political repression, and that's why we're here tonight talking about our rights. And before I really get into it, I do need to say a couple of things about the concept of rights in general, because I think our view is a little different than maybe our legal scholars here, or perhaps you know, the way that it was taught about in school. For example, I don't really subscribe to John Locke's view that rights were given to us at birth by God. Maybe I'm going against our host here at the Unitarian Church.
No, you're not!
But my view is that rights are a product of our struggle, right? They're things that we have to fight for, and they're constantly being negotiated by us on what we do when we fight for them, and by the people that have come before us and fought for their rights as well. So, you know, rights are not really eternal, and they can come and go depending on our struggle. And right now, I think all of us can kind of see that we're in a historical moment where the people who run this country seem determined to take away our rights. And they seem determined to replace the rule of law with outright terror. And of course, I'm talking about what's going on with ICE, I'm talking about what's going on in Minneapolis, and I just want to say that because we're going to need another event to talk specifically how to deal with your rights when talking to ICE, and that's actually going to be part 2 of our series here. So if people want to go in depth on what to do if ICE stops you, and I definitely do, that'll be the next event in the Know Your Rights series. Okay, so exactly what our rights are with respect to ICE is kind of currently being negotiated. It's murky, it's fluid, and they're negotiating right now as we speak. Right? Trump has his negotiators out there in the streets. They're slipping and sliding around in the snow. And we have our negotiators, right? That's the people in Minnesota. They're fighting for our rights right now. And what they're showing us is that the most important right of all is really the right to protest and the right to organize, because all of our other rights depend on it. And to that end, last year we organized as Orlando Against Police Crimes to get the charges dropped on a student who was protesting in solidarity with Palestine. His name was Chris Gibson. I don't know if you all heard about this case, but he was facing, I think, up to 10 years in jail for just protesting in a city council meeting. And we won that campaign, right? Those charges were dropped. And Chris is still out there making trouble, causing hell. They were reduced to a misdemeanor. Yes, that's correct, yeah. So he didn't spend a single day in jail. And that's because people organized and they fought back. The reason, and that's kind of the purpose of our training here today, to make sure that if any of y'all activists in Orlando get wrapped up in a political case, that we have the best chance of beating back that repression. And mostly in the United States, political repression comes from the FBI, right? The FBI are our political police, and that's kind of an uncomfortable fact for a lot of folks. I think it's easier for us to conceptualize the idea of political police when we think about other countries. The classic example would be in East Germany, the Stasi, right? Or the Gestapo in Nazi Germany. But the truth is that every country has political police. It's an essential function of the state in a modern society. And for us, it's the FBI. And you don't have to take my word for it. Just today, just look at what the FBI is doing. Today, the FBI arrested 2 protesters who were protesting in the church in Minneapolis. That was the FBI who came and locked them up, right? And that's an example of political repression. That's what we're talking about. So just as a way to go over some of the history of this, I am a history teacher, so forgive me for going back over some of this stuff. The FBI was actually founded in the early 20th century with the mission of persecuting anarchists. This was happening after the assassination of President McKinley. And if you follow that trail all the way up until the modern day, they've never strayed far from that idea. Now they do some other things here and there. Like if you look at their website, they mention other areas of work like investigating corruption, protecting people's civil rights, stopping terrorism. In the past they talked about investigating far-right groups like the Klan. And just take a look at the world around you. It doesn't really seem like they're doing a very good job at any of those things. So either they're really bad at that, or that's not really their real function in society, right? What they have done well is their core mission, which is suppressing revolutionary movements for change. And I don't want to belabor the point, but let me give you a couple of examples. Back in the 1920s, we had the first Red Scare, and J. Edgar Hoover, one of the influential leaders in the FBI, helped to initiate something called the Palmer Raids. How many people have heard of the Palmer Raids before? Okay, excellent. So you already know that during that time, the government rounded up hundreds of anarchists, communists, including very famous people like Emma Goldman, and without due process, deported them to the Soviet Union. They put them all in one big ship. They called it the Red Ark. And even citizens, United States citizens, were deported during the Palmer Raids. So it's, this is not the first time that we're dealing with this kind of political repression. And then, of course, you fast forward to the 1960s, and most people have heard about COINTELPRO, right? It targeted the Black Liberation Movement, including Dr. King, whom we just celebrated in the past week, where their infamous suicide letter, where they tried to induce him to kill himself. Others may have heard about the informant who gave Chicago police, FBI informant who gave Chicago police the outlay of Fred Hampton's home before they assassinated him in Chicago. And then there was the FBI who started the rumor that Stokely Carmichael was a CIA informant. And it actually caused Stokely Carmichael to go into exile, right? A lot of us have seen the famous film Malcolm X, right? But what people don't realize is that in that tragic scene at the end of the film where Malcolm X has been shot and he's dying on stage, and you see one of his acolytes come to administer him CPR, in real life that person was an FBI informant. And that really speaks to the extent to which they were disrupting the Black Liberation Movement. And of course, we have to bring it up to modern times as well. So if we talk about the 2000s, we have to talk about what was going on during the War on Terror, where we had the surveillance of Arab and Muslim Americans who spoke out against the wars, like the Floridian Palestinian professor Sami al-Arian from Tampa, who was accused of supporting terrorism, and ultimately he was deported to Turkey after a long legal battle. Right? So this is a through line throughout the history of the FBI. And, the CIA actually have a saying where they say that we only ever hear about their failures and we never hear about their successes. Right? With the FBI, I get the feeling that it's the opposite, right? We don't hear about the cases enough where people beat back the repression and actually win. So to correct that imbalance, we did reach out to our good friend in Los Angeles. Her name is Marisol Marquez. She's from Centro CSO, which is a grassroots organization that is in Loyal Heights in LA, and they participated in the protests against ICE last year, and they also faced some serious FBI repression and won. So we asked Sol to share some of their secrets to success, right? What were the things that helped them to be successful in their struggle? And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play just a video clip from Sol talking about how they beat the FBI. Thank you.
If I turn this up enough, do you think it'll explode?
I hope.
Hi, good afternoon, Orlando. Saludos from Los Angeles. My name is Sol Marquez, or Marisol Marquez, and I'm based out of Los Angeles, coming in from Boyle Heights. And I'm a member of Centro CSO, or Community Service Organization, as well as sit on the National Legalization for All Network. A network comprised of a lot of organizations that fight for legalization of all sorts of deportations and border militarization. So today I'm going to talk to you all about Alejandro Orellana, a very, very famous case that I think all of you may have united around, and thank you very much for standing in solidarity with our member here in Los Angeles. So I've known Alejandro for a very long time, 10 years now, and when we first met him, he was very, very young. He was a teenager still. And so he had brought himself to an event that was about LAPD and a lot of the killings that they were doing at the time in 2016. And so we really wanted him to be a part of CSO, so my husband and I, we gave him a ride back home, and then we talked to him a little bit about, just joining the organization. And so he did. And so he had been a member of CSO he has been a member of CSO for 10 years. And, just last night we were at a general body meeting, and so they were there. And so, they continue to do this to this day. So on January 8th, CSO had organized a protest against ICE raids. As you all know, nationally, ICE has been taking very large liberty at the hands of Trump and permission of many other of his cronies to, exact these raids against everyone who is basically not white, right, and in working class neighborhoods. In Los Angeles, it is a sanctuary city. The folks who stand in political power redid sanctuary city whenever Trump got inaugurated. So it is, again, been renewed with a lot tougher language, and also to make note that in the state of California, the entire state is a sanctuary state, not just the city of Los Angeles or the county that I live in. And so it's important to note that because everything that is happening is not supposed to be happening. And immigration is a federal matter, and so therefore federal agents should not be collaborating. The way that the laws are written is that they should not be collaborating with local law enforcement. So that is extremely important to understand. And so everything that they're doing is essentially not legal, right? And so January 8th, Centro CSO organized a protest against these ICE raids, and we had announced it for more than 2 weeks, I believe. And so I sit on the immigration committee, I'm one of the chairs, so I know that we announced it with ample time. And what did Trump do? He wrote an executive order the night before our event. So January 7th, he did an executive order to unleash the National Guard of the state of California onto our event. We had announced our march route, so it was not a surprise. This is our route all the time. So we started in Boyle Heights, which is the neighborhood that I'm in. It's a part of Los Angeles. And less than a mile and a half away, there is a detention center in downtown Los Angeles. It's called the Metropolitan Detention Center, or MDC. And so that is where our route was going to take us. And at MDC, we were going to try to make some noise because we had heard that at the time, people were being held under the building and under deplorable conditions. There was a whistleblower who had released a video that same week that our event was. And so our intention was to, let them know that we were out there and we were fighting for their justice. So we announced our march route before June 8th publicly. We had already said that, so it was no surprise that we were going to go downtown and then we were going to loop right back to Boyle Heights. And so the fact that the National Guard was deployed the night prior by Trump to our event, let's make note of that, they aligned themselves to protect MDC. And so we were bound to meet up with them, right? Our plan was to stay as far away from them as possible. We had children in strollers. My own little ones were there. My infant at the time was with us, but she started acting up, and so my husband had just taken her back home. But she was going to be there that same day. So January 8th, the reason this is important is because something very important happened the same day. So we had already said, let's do the event that day, June 8th, not January, June 8th. And so right before our event was starting, we were trying to gather materials, as you will do. You try to get all your supplies, your logistical checklist. And so we were setting up, and while I was, doing other things and also working, I get a call from one of our CSO members that there is going to be a donation to us for our event that day. And the donation included PPE, so personal protective equipment, which were those little masks that you used during COVID, including water and like hand sanitizer, right? So I was like, yeah, that's amazing. We had never heard of this nonprofit organization. And so, we were like, that's great. And so, there was quite a bit of water too, so we really were gonna need it. And so the event was starting in a later afternoon, so that, that's my little one down there. So we wanted to, get these supplies and split them in half as much as possible. For us and our event, there were so many supplies that we wanted to just utilize some of them for us, right? And so we did that. We kept a portion for us. And then we went ahead and said, let's go ahead and donate some to downtown. There were already people downtown protesting. And so this member of CSO and a couple of others gathered together to drop them off in downtown. Alejandro Orellana was one of the people who was in a vehicle, right? And so we said, that's awesome that people are donating supplies to us, let's go ahead and drop them off. Not realizing that it could have been potentially a setup, right? And so we drove the supplies. There's a video that has gone viral. You can actually check out that video on the Twitter of the U.S. Attorney General Bill Essayli, if you want to know what I'm talking about, unless you already saw it. So there is a video of some folks that are alleged to be our members, and so it looks from like the video, there's water that's being distributed and a couple of PPE supplies, right? In the video, it's very unusual that you can't even really see the box, but they're already using the words bionic shields, right? It's like, what? Like that makes it seem like we're like Transformers, right? But anyway, so that happened right before our event. So then our event happens, and we have some of those supplies and we give them out. And there's no footage from that. There just happens to be the footage before at a random drop-off spot in downtown where there were just, a spontaneous protest. And so from our event, there's no footage of that. So our event happens June 8th. We march downtown, and then the National Guard becomes very, very violent without any kind of warning to any of us. And I was actually helping on security, so I was at the very front of the event. On June 8th, the National Guard gave us no warning, or else we would have stopped marching, right? We would have stopped. We weren't even angry, we were peacefully walking. And so they just started firing tear gas at us, at our crowd, with a lot of children and babies in strollers. Some parents had their children on them, with the carrier, and so it was just awful. And so as soon as I saw that, I said, "Y'all stop! We can't proceed." And so we went ahead and gave the immediate order to our security to turn right around. We didn't even do anything at FBC because they were firing at us. This had never happened to a CSO event. We've done protests like that so many times I can't even count them. It's our route. It's our traditional route. And so, people were coughing, the babies were choking. It was horrible. We had medics, so we were able to give them some aid. But as soon as we started marching back, we just reassembled. Some of us really wanted to just, they were angry and they wanted to stay there and see what happened. So some of our folks actually stayed in downtown, and the rest of us marched right back. The majority. of us marched right back. And so when we got back, we finished our event and it all was peaceful. So, we thought we had done a great job. There was no indication that anything was wrong, right? There was no law enforcement that approached us or our members asking us any questions about, anything that had happened earlier in that day with Alejandro Orellana, right? So our event concluded and that was June 8th. Well, at the very, very early hours of June 12th, Alejandro Orellana in East Los Angeles was raided by 3 agencies. Those agencies are the FBI, the East LA Sheriff's Department, remember they're not supposed to be working together, and Border Patrol. So it initially came into the Rapid Response Team, which we are a part of, and folks actually thought that it was a regular ICE raid, so they responded. There were people there who were handing out Know Your Rights information, and then lo and behold, at 6 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from Alejandro Orellana as the raid is happening, and we're informed that the raid is happening to him. And so we understood at that point that it was not an immigration raid, that it was related to us fighting back for immigrant rights. And so he's taken, we don't know where he's taken, it's a chaotic situation. One of our members of CSO and also a fellow Teamster of Alejandro Orellana was actually the person who answered the call and was on the phone with them as the raid was happening. So she was able to hear that, the door was being knocked down by these agencies and that the house was being flash bombed inside with his parents and his siblings inside, right? It was a horrible, violent, and chaotic situation, a very scary situation for Alejandro, but they remained calm. And so it's important to note that we had no clue where they were taking Alejandro. We just knew that if somebody was taken by these particular agencies, it would most likely happen in one of the jails or the detention center, the same one that we referenced earlier. And so we were updating and refreshing the screen to see if his name popped up, and lo and behold, it did. So we went ahead and called for an immediate press conference that very, very same day. So remember that this raid happened at 6 o'clock in the morning. We're trying to find his name, and it still hasn't come up for the day. Sorry, y'all, I have a little one. And so, okay, let me pause.
Now we have a part 2. We said escape. Yeah, part 2. The button. This here? Button, yeah. Use the button. This one? This one here? The right one? The left one? Just building suspense, right?
Immediately after that, we started asking people for donations so that we could cover their attorney and also any legal costs that might happen. There was basically a fee, like a bail fee that was $5,000. We were able to cover that right away because people were so generous in donating. So it's strongly advised that you all, if that were ever to happen, to issue a solidarity statement and to ask folks to be able to cover any legal costs and for donations. So it's very nice. It's amazing to know that our movement is one that resonates with the community at large and for folks at large who care about immigrant rights. And so the fact that we were able to, cover the 5,000, not even 24 hours, and be able to, hand a check to the attorneys and say, we got Alejandro's back is just incredible. So remember to do that and ask for help, I know that a lot of us are used to being the help and providing, countless hours of, just donated labor and great work that we do, so asking for help is really hard for us, but it really should happen so that we can cover the costs. We also were able to cover the cost of the destruction that the FBI, the Sheriff's Department, and the Border Patrol did to Alejandro's truck, house, and just confiscating their phones and breaking them. So we were able to cover that through people's generous donations. And so we immediately started asking for folks around the country to help out with Alejandro Orellana's case. And so we reached out to the Committee to Stop FBI Repression, the experts on the matter of being targeted and witch hunted by the FBI, and they immediately issued a statement of support and asked anyone who was affiliated with them to also do the same and even have their own events saying hands off of Alejandro Orellana, release them, because that was initially the first demand, was to release Alejandro. It happened, I believe it was 24 days after, so June 13th is when Alejandro was released. So we were having press conferences up until they were released. And so, the trial happened, the pre-trial, and they realized the oppositional side, which included, the U.S., it was actually the U.S. against Alejandro Orellana. So the U.S. side pretty much realized that it was an entire Mickey Mouse trial. There was no teeth to it, and nobody would see that protective personal equipment, PPEs, like a little flimsy plastic visor, which is what they call the bionic shield, would ever stand anything against, the National Guard's weaponry or what they were firing at us. Remember that on June 8th, the National Guard did actually, start firing at us. Well, the escalation continued that same day. We heard about somebody losing fingers because of what they fired at them. Peaceful protesters, y'all. You all are familiar with this, so I know that I'm preaching to the choir, but that's what happened at that event that same day and that weekend, is that people got their fingers shot off, somebody lost an eye, a woman actually was shot in the chest, and so she needed reconstructive surgery after they decimated her chest. Just like super violent behavior for just a peaceful assembly and demanding that the ICE raids stop, that the terror stop. And so, it's just ridiculous that is our situation now, and that we are being blamed for, inciting, the charge that Alejandro was being charged with was material support for civil unrest, which is like water. You're kidding me? Like, water is that material support that you all think is gonna somehow shield us against the terror that you all are enacting. And then these flimsy visors, these little flimsy masks that we used for, that wouldn't even contain like a COVID situation, and yet we're supposed to say that matches the weaponry that they have on the oppositional side or the National Guard side. Just ridiculous. So, of course, the charges were dropped after much demand from a lot of people around the country, and the fact that we were going to keep, being very annoying to them. And we had done a large movement around the country. So the Committee to Stop FBI Repression became one of our allies. So was the Legalization for All Network. I'm wearing one of the shirts, the very first shirt that ever came out for Legalization for All. And it's a network of various grassroots organizations around the country that fight for undocumented or immigrant rights, and also is trying to win legalization for all across the board. And so another alliance or ally that joined up with us was the National Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression, which CSO is also affiliated with. They issued statements of support. And around the country, there were more than 24 organizations that had their own solidarity events, their own press conferences, because we knew that if this was something that the National Guard, the federal government, Trump by effect, were going to start doing, and it was going to become a trend, then we all stood to lose if Alejandro did not win his case. They were making an example out of them, and they were also making an example out of us in our movement here in Los Angeles. I would even say that the movement here is kind of like the predecessor for the immigrant rights movement across the country. So why else would Trump, executively order the National Guard, and then on top of that later did the US Marines here at our events in Los Angeles. And to see that really dystopian way that the US Marines were trying to practice at a public park, because they've never been trained to actually, you know, put hands or even deal with their own civilians. It's just, you know, incomprehensible for them, so they had to be trained to do that. And we were watching it live on the news as they were doing these exercises, and the press and the, you know, legislative officers were saying, you know, don't be alarmed, they're not doing a massive ice raid, they're just practicing to try to raid you later. You know, it's just like, in what reality are we in right now? So, you know, just wanted to stress that, you know, we're not alone, and it's very, very wise to make friends along the way. We should be trying to make friends along the way, because if it's just you by yourself, imagine if Alejandro had been by themselves and these 3 agencies had come after them and raided them, and there was no one to turn to for help, you know? So it's really, really good to stay allied with a lot of people who have the same goal in mind, and that's to take down the Trump administration and stop the terror that they've done to our people. One other thing I wanted to say is that we should not be afraid. You know, we're not doing anything wrong. Handing out water, protective personal equipment is not a crime. It is not a crime anywhere. And so Alejandro had never done anything wrong. You know, driving a truck is not a crime. I mean, people drive trucks all the time, you know? And so the fact that they were providing water and, you know, some effort to try to stop the National Guard's, you know, bullets or pepper spray, like tear gas, that is like the least we could do, honestly. And so, you know, stand by your convictions, don't be afraid, and speak up. Alejandro Orellana was speaking out and was rightfully, you know, defending themselves and saying, I've done nothing wrong, protesting is not a crime. And so, you know, just don't be afraid. And if this were ever to happen to y'all, make sure that you stand behind the person and always put them up and bring them to different events. We had Alejandro speaking at literally every event we could think of and making up events. And so, you know, it's just a really good idea to unite with as many forces as possible who see Trump as a bad person, because that's exactly what he is. And, you know, just unite and fight back. Never stop until you win justice. I also want to say that our enemy, of course, you know, was also the U.S. Attorney, Bill O'Reilly. And I want to say something about Bill O'Reilly and also their Twitter, because it's up and you can see it, and he was rightfully so, you know, demanding to know who this guy driving the truck was. You know, when the right wing started, you know, trying to break down what I think is a setup, right? And, you know, I'm not going to get all conspiracy theorists, but convenient that, like, the press was zeroing in and saying bionic shields, and that video was trying to be used in court. But I do want to say that, you know, Bill O'Reilly was very much trying to incite people to get more people like that. Like, who are the other people in the video? Please identify them, right? Stuff like that. And just this past week, Bill O'Reilly's Twitter also, or X, also started saying that, you know, he retweeted the different hotline numbers that are around, like, the United States, but especially the ones here in Southern California for rapid responding if there's an ice raid, and retweeted that and said that encouraged the opposition or Republicans or right-wingers, white supremacists even, that they should file and call and make false reports to waste our time. And so, you know, just a really horrible person who is totally okay with people being kidnapped, children being targeted, pepper sprayed, tear gassed in their vehicles, little babies, you know, and, you know, the green light is there. Bill O'Reilly has put the green light on our movement and what we're trying to do to protect our people. So a Renee Good situation, he's totally perfectly fine with that X that came out after, you know, her life was taken in Minnesota. So, you know, just wanted to say thank you all for having me speak. I'm really sorry I wasn't able to make it there in person, of course, but also not being able to make it on Zoom. It's really difficult with my little ones, and at the time that you all are having your event, I would be picking up my daughter from school. So here's a video. I hope that this was helpful in any way. If you all would like for me to answer any questions later, I'd be happy to do so. Big hugs to the compañeros there, Cassia, Connor, longtime friends, but also all of you who I've never met and are fighting the good fight.